Light will collide with the Milky Way.
We want to know where we come from and our destiny.
Milky Way on Nova.
Tonight at 9 on WTTW. WTTW programming originates from the Renee Crown Public Media Center.
Next time on Midsummer Murders.
Seems the area around these woods is a UFO hotspot.
A woman is killed with a mysterious material.
What is this stuff?
I have absolutely no idea.
As Barnaby and Nelson investigate,
This was a UFO, was it? It was an alien craft.
another strange event occurs.
It was hunting me.
Find out the truth
Cooper Hill seems to be a hot destination for aliens.
on Midsummer Murders.
Saturday at 7 on WTTW.
Next time on Death in Paradise.
Francis died from the poison water hemlock.
Water hemlock?
A reenactment group's stew is poisoned and one of them is killed.
How did Francis consume more poison than any of the others?
Death in Paradise.
Saturday at 9:30 on WTTW.
Hi, I'm Jackie visiting from Portland, Oregon.
And I'm Victoria from Chicago. And you're watching WTTW.
Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight. I'm Paris Schutz. Brandis Friedman is on assignment. On the show tonight, former Mayor Rahm Emanuel is one step closer to becoming the next U.S. ambassador to Japan, but at least 2 Democratic senators are opposing his nomination.
I am fully committed to accountability across the entire Park District system.
Our Spotlight Politics team focuses on the sex abuse scandal rocking the Chicago Park District.
Starting with the most important experience of all, connecting with people.
Facebook is morphing into Meta, but what exactly is the metaverse? Why overlooking women in biomedical research may put every patient at a disadvantage.
During the pandemic, when I turned 11 and 12, when it came time to get the vaccine, I was on board.
We speak with students at Chicago State who are encouraging COVID-19 vaccines, including 12-year-old Aubrey Ewing.
And it is the truth.
The Oscar-nominated actor David Strathairn joined us to talk about a one-man show he's performing at Chicago Shakespeare Theater and his long career in Hollywood and independent film.
We're definitely happy to be one of the few people that are still standing.
And we have a drink with 2 African-American women who saved the city's last lesbian bar. But first, some of today's top stories. Former State Representative Louis Arroyo pleads guilty to 1 count of wire fraud. Arroyo announced that he offered a member of the Illinois Senate monthly payments of $2,500 to support a bill backed by a sweepstakes firm that hired Arroyo as a lobbyist. Arroyo was first indicted on a charge of bribery in October 2019, resigning from the Illinois House 1 month later. He's scheduled to be sentenced on February 18th. Local healthcare providers have begun administering COVID-19 vaccines to kids 5 and up following recent recommendations by the CDC. About 100,000 doses are expected to arrive here in the first week of vaccinations, with more arriving soon. This comes as the city is starting to see a slight uptick in cases after weeks of decline. The current daily average is 322 compared to 288 the week prior, and the positivity rate is 1.8%, up from 1.6% the week prior. Heather Mack, a Chicagoan who served more than 7 years in an Indonesian prison for killing her mother at a luxury resort in Bali, has been indicted on murder conspiracy charges in the United States and taken into federal custody. Mack arrived at O'Hare International Airport this morning, and FBI agents took her into custody. She's been charged with conspiring to kill her mother. Also charged is Mack's former boyfriend, Tommy Schaefer, who who was also convicted of murder in Indonesia and is still in prison there. And up next, a key Senate committee approves Rahm Emanuel's nomination to ambassador to Japan. But who voted no for the Chicago mayor? Find out right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
Former Mayor Rahm Emanuel's nomination to be U.S. Ambassador to Japan was approved by the Senate Foreign Relations Committee today, but 2 Democrats voted against his appointment. WTTW News reporter Heather Sharon joins us now with more. Heather, those 2 Democrats are Senators Jeff Merkley of Oregon and Ed Markey of Massachusetts. They joined Republicans Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio in voting down this nomination. How come?
Well, it wasn't a surprise that Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio voted no. They have presidential aspirations in 2024, so that's not a surprise. But it was a surprise when Oregon Senator Jeff Merkley put out a statement just before the hearing reading, quote, "Black Lives Matter. Here in the halls of Congress, it is important that we not just speak and believe these words, but put them into action in the decisions we make," end quote. That is a clear reference to the death of Laquan McDonald at the hands of a Chicago police officer. Merkley was the only member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee to press Rahm Emanuel on how he handled that 2014 police murder while he was in office. And it was clear that the former mayor just didn't answer those questions to the Oregon senator's satisfaction. Now, I reached out to Senator Markey's office, and he didn't get back to me, but he is also a member of the progressive wing of the Democratic Senate.
And certainly there were lobbying efforts on behalf of Rahm Emanuel to get the nomination, lobbying efforts from groups wanting to see him not get that nomination. So what does this all mean when it goes before the full Senate?
Well, it means that the former mayor will rely on members of the Republican Senate to push his nomination over the edge if he is successful. Now, 5 Republican senators have said they support him, so that seems possible right now, but his nomination will not be confirmed with a unanimous vote of all of the Democrats in the United States Senate.
And these nominations have been going really slow because of some opposition. Do we know when this confirmation is likely to take place?
We don't, and we have Ted Cruz to thank for that. He has put a hold on basically all of President Biden's nominations and State Department nominations, so we will have to wait and see how that process works its way out.
All right, Heather, thank you as always, and we'll see you again later in the program for some Spotlight Politics. Thanks again.
Thanks, Paris.
And you can read Heather's full story on our website. That's at WTTW.com/news. The company formerly known as Facebook is now called Meta. That was the big news last week when Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg said the social media platform was changing its company name to Meta and pivoting its focus to the metaverse, a sci-fi-like reimagining of the internet through a virtual 3D landscape. And joining us now to help explain this emerging iteration of the internet are Blaise, assistant professor of computer science at the University of Chicago, and Rabi Ratan, an associate professor at Michigan State University's Department of Media and Information. Welcome, both of you, to Chicago Tonight. Blaise, I'll start with you. What exactly is the metaverse?
Sure. So the metaverse is this reimagining of how we communicate by basically putting ourselves in this virtual video game world. So imagine you got to be transported into this video game world and interact with your friends, your family, your coworkers by moving around in this world, purchasing objects, and really just having a lot of your communications and convenings mediated in this metaverse.
And we're looking right now at some footage of Mark Zuckerberg in that metaverse. Rabi Ratan, what does it mean for the metaverse that Facebook is making this big bet and changing its company name to Meta?
It's actually not that surprising. They've been moving in this direction since about 2014 when they purchased Oculus, the virtual reality headset company, for over $2 billion. And in the past year, there's been a significant amount of attention in Silicon Valley on this idea of the metaverse. It's not really new. It's just the next level of the internet. It's an embodied approach to the internet. So you can wear a virtual reality headset and move around in those spaces, but you can also access it through a flat screen computer or even a phone. But it's really that level of embodiment that makes it different. And also the integration with blockchain technology. You might have heard of Bitcoin or Ethereum. Well, those technologies are at the cutting edge of this future internet. So Facebook wants to own as much of this space as possible, I imagine, because this is where people will engage in the internet in the future in the majority of their time.
And it's not just Facebook. Microsoft has invested a lot in this. Even brands like Nike are following suit with metaverse plans. So, Blazer, how widely used and widespread could the metaverse be? I mean, will it be like these science fiction movies where people are living their whole lives in the virtual world?
Yeah, I'm a little skeptical of a complete sense of integration. And of course, I think elements of the metaverse will become an important part of our daily lives. If we look at the rise of social media back in Facebook's first iteration 15 years ago, I mean, social media has become an important part of many people's lives. And if we look at this also, how we're working from home, communicating from home in this pandemic, there's a lot of value to technology-mediated communication. That said, being part of this virtual world has lots of downsides and concerns. And I'm not sure that I myself really want to live my whole life in a virtual world.
The real world can be real nice. Ravi Ratan, what about limitations with equipment or technology? I mean, if you want to really use the metaverse, you have to have one of those headsets. Anything else that could be limiting?
Oh, certainly. There's a literacy required in order to access some of the virtual worlds, even if you have the technology. There are limitations in terms of age, right? Some of the content is hard to access, and certainly concerns about different age groups. Kids are more malleable, so they're more likely to think what they see in virtual reality is real. But I do actually think that these technologies will increase equality and access to information in society by, Oculus the Quest is quite inexpensive. I doubt they're making a huge profit on it. They're trying to get it into as many hands as possible because they want a big piece of this infrastructure, right? A big piece of the metaverse pie. So I think there are good sides and there are some concerning sides.
And Blazer, there's a lot of concerns with Facebook and what they've done with all the information that they've gathered on their users and other technology companies as well. Will there be even more concerns now in the metaverse?
Oh, absolutely. Because, as we've seen over these last 15 years, Facebook has some troubles with privacy. And, in my own research, our research group focuses on privacy and security. And so if we think about, the access to information Facebook has had, a lot of it's been, mediated by your phone, mediated by a keyboard. And so they're picking up all these signals about who you are, personalizing things to you, typecasting you, stereotyping you based just on, your words and photos you're uploading. But in this metaverse, they're capturing lots of new signals about your body, how you move through space, exactly what you're doing in all parts of life. And if this vision of we're going to live large parts of our life in a metaverse is true, well, large parts of your life will be tracked and surveilled. And so I think there's, the privacy concerns are boundless as we're moving into this world.
Ravi Ratan, how does the metaverse work? I mean, will there be a governing council if it's just like Facebook and a couple other companies that have to interact with each other? Who makes all the rules?
That's a great question. So the W3C, the World Wide Web Consortium, currently creates standards for the web to facilitate interoperability, the ways that websites communicate with each other. No one really owns the internet, though, right? So there are big companies that own servers that connect to the internet, and the more they can draw users to their servers, the more of your attentional bandwidth, the data, as Blaze was just saying, that they own, which of course is their bread and butter. Like that is the value that they extract from users. And so in the future, I mean, I know the W3C does have a working group focused on metaverse standards. And just like we want interoperability, they're JPEG files. This is a metaphor I like to use. You can move a JPEG file from this website to that computer program very easily, right? Well, imagine on the metaverse, you can move an avatar. The same avatar looks just like you. You created in Ready Player Me, which is a great software for thinking about this. You can create an avatar on your phone browser from a picture of yourself, and then 5 minutes later, be using it in VR chat or 5 minutes after that, be using it in Mozilla hubs. These are two kind of virtual environments that are easily accessible. So that interoperability, those standards for the same file type going between places is facilitated in part by governing agencies, or at least these consortiums like the W3C, but there's also the blockchain technologies. So if you're not familiar, a blockchain is essentially a record of a transaction, a virtual transaction. So if I have a record of creating this avatar and taking it from one space to another, I can own it. I can own it like an NFT, a non-fungible token. I can own that digital piece of art. I can sell it.
And your avatar might be flying from one place to there. Very quickly, Blazer, Facebook also announced that it's doing away with its facial recognition technology that ran afoul of the law in Illinois, basically saying that you can't collect people's biometric data without their consent. Is this a positive development, do you believe?
Yeah, I think Facebook moving away from facial recognition as used on Facebook for suggesting who might be in a photo you upload is a great development. And yeah, the regulatory environment in Illinois specifically, I think, has had a large part to do with this. Of course, it remains to be seen what's going to happen, in the metaverse, because they didn't announce that in the metaverse they're not going to be thinking.
Right, they might take it away from Facebook, but maybe in the metaverse, that they didn't say whether or not they would use that kind of technology in the metaverse. It's a very fascinating discussion. I'm sure we'll be having more discussions like this, but we have to leave it there for now. Our thanks to Blazer and Robbie Rattan. Thank you so much. A new report says we collectively understand women's health far less than men's health. That's because just a fraction of research funds to study things like Alzheimer's, heart disease, and autoimmune disease go towards studying women, even though they disproportionately face those diseases. The report is from the group Women's Health Access Matters. It found that a $300 million investment into research focused on women would yield a $13 billion return. It's not just the research field that's grappling with the gender equity, it's also healthcare and the medical workforce. And joining us to talk about these issues and what's being done to address them are Dr. Shikha Jain of the University of Illinois Cancer Center and the founder and president of the nonprofit Women in Medicine. Nicole Wojtowicz, Research Assistant Professor of Medical Social Sciences at Northwestern's Feinberg School of Medicine. Wojtowicz holds a doctorate in biochemistry and molecular biology. And Dr. Vineet Arora, Dean for Medical Education at the University of Chicago Pritzker School of Medicine. Welcome all of you to Chicago tonight. And Nicole Wojtowicz, I'll start with you. Just how overlooked are women when it comes to biomedical research, both as subjects of studies and with data analysis?
Well, first off, thank you so much for having us tonight on this panel. Historically, women and females, and I say females because really this includes our animal models that we use in biomedical research and our cells that are really the first areas where we design and test drugs and therapies. Historically, they've been predominantly male. And so this has really been an issue over the past several decades. And many people don't know that it wasn't until 1993, per an act of Congress, that women were required to be included in National Institutes of Health funded clinical research studies. And then in 2016, the National Institutes of Health also implemented a policy requiring scientists to consider sex as a biological variable in their work. So really, it has only been within the last decade or two that we've seen a push towards inclusion of women and females in biomedical research.
Certainly, relatively recently. And Dr. Vineet Arora, there's a recent example where we just didn't really understand much about women's health issue. And this has to do with COVID-19 and pregnancy. So explain that.
Yes, absolutely. When the COVID-19 vaccine came out, there were no pregnant people or people who were breastfeeding in those trials. And so one thing that resulted from that was this discussion of shared decision-making, because there was really no data to guide the decision-making for predominantly women who were in this position, including myself as a healthcare worker who was breastfeeding at the time, deciding whether to take the vaccine. And while many studies have now since come out highlighting the importance of getting COVID-19 vaccine for people who are pregnant or breastfeeding, as well as the health benefits, that exclusion of that population actually gave a void, and that void was filled with disinformation and misinformation that has actually still led to women, predominantly women, but also pregnant people and people who are breastfeeding, from actually avoiding the vaccine, which is very concerning given the health impact of COVID, on the severity of COVID on those who are pregnant especially.
There was certainly a lot of confusion in that field for a long time. Dr. Shikha Jain, it's not just research and healthcare that we're talking about here, but also the workforce in healthcare. So how does that need to change to be more inclusive?
That's a great question. And it's so important to remember that these disparities that we're talking about, they directly impact the healthcare workers, because we're seeing women in medicine not being selected for awards or not being selected for promotion or advancement. We're seeing them being overlooked for leadership positions. And there's study after study that has actually shown when you have a more diverse workforce and you have more diverse leadership, you actually see benefits in both the way patients are treated and the overall outcomes of patients. But also you see benefits in the healthcare system where you see increased retention, you see your workers are happy, you see more innovation. So we see huge disparities when it comes to pay, when it comes to promotion, when it comes to publications, when it comes to awards. There's all these disparities that exist within the healthcare workforce. And then the direct impact of that is that we're losing brilliant, accomplished, ambitious women from the health force. They're not accelerating into leadership positions. And then that has a direct impact on the institutions as well as the overall healthcare systems and the patients who we're treating.
All right, and Nicole Wojtovich, going back to the research part of it, how does it impact men and women, all people, when women and females are not included in enough biomedical research studies?
So I think this has led to a gap in our understanding of human health and disease. Because so much of our research has been done solely in males, we're lacking information about how sex as a biological variable affects health and disease across body systems. One example that we might not think of is that there was a study that looked at treatment for glioblastoma, which is a type of brain cancer. And just by analyzing the patient data by sex, they found that there were differences in patient responses to treatment in men versus women. And just by asking that question and breaking down the data by sex, they're able to start thinking about, well, how can we tailor treatments that would be more effective for all people?
Dr. Vanita Arora, what if we add in other variables here, women of color, in terms of research and quality of healthcare? Are there disparities here too?
Absolutely. There is a wealth of literature highlighting the disparities in U.S. healthcare, particularly with poorer outcomes for those who are from minority groups. We also know that part of that reason is actually our workforce. And so we know that when we admit medical students and residents to our institutions, that those who are from groups that are underrepresented in medicine, or those that are from lower socioeconomic status communities or rural communities, are more likely to go serve those communities. And so this really gets down to a workforce problem, because if you don't actually, much of clinical research is also informed by your personal experience. And so there's been literature showing that there's a huge gap in research as well to study conditions that predominantly affect Black people, likely due to the inadequate funding of really promotion of investigators who are from those underrepresented in medicine groups.
So research and workforce connected here in these problems. Dr. Shikha Jain, we mentioned that you have a nonprofit called Women in Medicine. You organize conferences and training programs. What are the things being done to close these gaps right now?
So there's a lot of amazing organizations around the country that are working to close these gaps. Some of the things that we do in our nonprofit is we have this annual conference that is really leadership training and empowerment of women and also of men, because none of these changes are going to happen without men at the table as well. We've created longitudinal leadership programs to help women become more empowered and learn how to negotiate for themselves. And not only that, but also change the systems within which they work. And we've created leadership programming for men as well, because there's a lot of men who really want to help close the gender gap and want to address these inequities, but they don't always have the tools or the know-how how to do it because it isn't something that's been taught in medical school education, and it's not something that has been intentionally looked at for a long time. So we're starting to create all of this programming to help people understand not only that the problem exists, but then to empower both men and women to take the reins and create structures that are going to address the barriers that have resulted in this really problematic inequities that exist in healthcare that are impacting people, whether they are in the healthcare workforce or not.
So it impacts everybody. Nicole Wojtovich at the top, we mentioned this study that said that with just a $300 million investment in studying women, you get something like a $13 billion return on investment. Can you explain that for us?
So I think, what the issue is that women's health research is underfunded and understudied. And if we make an economic decision to fund research that supports women and other underrepresented groups, it's a trickle-down effect. You will have scientists and other investigators and clinicians be able to apply for grants that support research in these areas. And then once that is integrated into our biomedical enterprise, we will then be able to see the outcomes of that research then translating from the bench to the bedside.
And Dr. Vanita Arora, what about the pay gap? As I read here, there's a huge salary gap still in healthcare between men and women.
Absolutely. And so while we have equal numbers of women and men entering the workforce in healthcare, we do not have equal numbers at the leadership level. And we also suffer a huge pay gap. And so even when trying to control for a variety of different factors, such as number of patients seen or the type of medical practice that you have, we still see about a $20,000 pay gap. And a recent report from the Association of American Medical Colleges clearly outlines that this pay gap has persisted. So we're going to need a lot of solutions, focus on solutions there, like transparency and greater pay equity from the leadership level for institutions to implement.
All right, a lot of issues brought to light here with this report, and we're glad that you're illuminating this for us. Our thanks to Dr. Shika Jain, Nicole Wojtovich, and Dr. Vanita Arora. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And up next, a new effort to bring vaccine awareness to communities with low rates of vaccination with the help of kids. So stay with us.
I come from a people that not only found a way to survive through the most horrific circumstances, but they thrived.
I could not save one of the boys of color in my own life. If my family could be exposed to this horror, then really it could happen to anyone. We are truly all in this together.
Chicago State University is partnering with the Chicago Urban League and the Bronzeville Children's Museum in a new effort to bring COVID-19 vaccine awareness to Black and brown communities. Arts correspondent Angel Ito tells us how this video contest is working to dispel vaccine myths and educate the public on vaccine benefits.
Students at Chicago State University are encouraging members in their community to get the COVID-19 vaccine through the help of a new initiative called Vax-A-Million. In addition to hosting community events where vaccines are offered with a $50 financial incentive.
Excuse me, are you vaccinated?
Yeah.
No?
What you mean no?
Wait, why? Why would you become vaccinated?
Get vaccinated is to protect your family, protect your people and whatnot. Why won't you get vaccinated, you know?
Students were tasked with creating 1-minute videos on why getting the vaccine is imperative. The most creative video winners received $1,500.
With the vaccine, the choice is yours.
12-year-old Aubrey is one of those campaign winners.
We're 2 years in COVID, and we know those results, and they're not good. So the vaccine could go down or up, but we're already down, so the only place we can go is up.
Dr. Suzette McKinney agrees. As a featured panelist in the Vax-A-Million campaign's Facts Over Fear conversation, she says the campaign works to address common misconceptions people have about not only getting the vaccine, but fears around going to the doctor as well.
what many of them look at are healthcare disparities that currently exist, many of which have existed for quite a long period of time. In Black and brown communities, we see higher rates of chronic health conditions such as diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease. The healthcare system has not always treated Black and brown communities with the same level of dignity and respect that they've treated non-minority communities. So with COVID and with the COVID-19 vaccine, many people in Black and brown communities don't necessarily trust that this is a vaccine that is going to be helpful to them. Because of specific situations that we've seen in history, they are the essential workers that are required to be out continuing to provide services when the disease spread initially started. And so being out in the public, they were at greater risk of exposure.
Now that was the focus of CSU junior Kyra's video campaign, who was also a winner. Kyra reminds people who she's taking the vaccine for.
I have underlying health problems, my respiration isn't the best, and I'm pregnant. But I have the vaccine, I've had it for months, I've been okay, and at this point I actually feel safer. I took this vaccination for my kids, my unborn child, and the people around me, not just family, because my neighbor is part of my family. My teacher is part of my family. I see her 3 times a week. So at this point, you know, I want her to be safe. I want her to go home to her family safe. That being said, I'm just happy that Chicago State gave me power behind my voice.
CSU President Scott says she's proud to represent an institution that's playing such a vital role.
One of the most important things that we can do for our future is making sure that there's diversity in healthcare and in science, because we have to do something to get cultural awareness and cultural competency in the healthcare profession. And I think that's one of the things that Chicago State brings to the community.
For Chicago Tonight, this is Angel Ito.
A total of 14 students were part of the project, with 8 videos produced in the first round of the campaign's contest, which will officially roll out on the Vax-A-Million website this Friday. It is yet to be decided whether they'll host another contest round or community vaccination event. And you can visit our website for more information. And still to come on Chicago Tonight, Congressman Adam Kinzinger is not running for the House again, so what's in store for his political future? That and much more in Spotlight's Politics. And actor David Strathairn talks about his one-man show at Chicago Shakespeare Theater and his illustrious film career.
We've had such a response from, straight people in the neighborhood, the trans community, gay men.
And hear how 2 women are working to make their bar inclusive to everyone. But first, some more of today's top stories. Senator Dick Durbin is calling for an investigation into Heartland Alliance, which operates an immigration shelter in Bronzeville, and that shelter is housing Afghan refugee children. This after reports of ill-equipped staff and instances of children hurting themselves. ProPublica reported dozens of police calls to the shelter in the past month for suicide attempts, assaults, and mental health disturbances. The shelter is one of 4 run by the Chicago-based Heartland Alliance, which is caring for 77 Afghan children at the moment. Durbin said the report, quote, raises serious and troubling allegations about the health and safety of children. Heartland Alliance says it supports an investigation. Chicago public school officials say they've reached an agreement with the Chicago Teachers Union to set aside funding for hiring additional school staffers. $10 million will go toward hiring additional substitutes, as well as compensation for missed teacher prep time and for teachers covering additional classes. CPS CEO Pedro Martinez said schools have been incredibly resilient throughout this pandemic and that, quote, by giving our schools more funding and flexibility, we can ease the burden on administrators and educators so they can focus on their most important job, preparing every Chicago public school student for success in the classroom and beyond. David Strathairn has been an in-demand actor for decades, from his early films with John Sayles through his Oscar-nominated performance as the legendary journalist Edward R. Murrow in the 2005 film Good Night and Good Luck. Other notable films include Lincoln, directed by Steven Spielberg, and the Oscar-winning Nomadland. And now he's appearing at Chicago Shakespeare Theater in a one-man performance called Remember This, The Lesson of Jan Karski. And David Straithairn joins us now from Navy Pier. David Straithairn, what a pleasure it is to have you. Thanks for being here with Chicago Tonight.
Thanks so much for doing this for the production. So
all right,
really an honor.
So tell us about the real-life character, Jan Karski, that you play, and the thrust of the story that you're getting at.
Well, where to begin? I guess, well, we'll start with what the play centers around. It is somewhat of a chronological journey through his life, but it focuses primarily on his time as a courier for the Polish underground, carrying messages from the front to the government in exile in France, and then ultimately to his coming to the West to report on the atrocities of the Holocaust to Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Justice Felix Frankfurter, among others, Foreign Secretary Anthony Eden in England. And then it touches on his career as a teacher at Georgetown University from 1952 to 1992. It's kind of a large scope to cover, but I feel that we're pretty much doing justice to the high points of his life and indeed to the incredible legacy that he leaves in terms of bearing witness.
It's an amazing life and an amazing story, and it was almost like he was screaming into the void because he told FDR about what was happening. He told other leaders, and they didn't take any action. And as I understand, he blamed himself for that. Why was that?
Well, I don't know if he blamed himself, but he did feel a sense of failure, having made it to the offices of the most powerful people in the world at the time, with a message that he felt was crucial to, at least stop the annihilation of the Jewish people while there was still time to stop it. So he did carry, I believe, a sense of failure. Obviously, he didn't fail. It was the failure of others to act upon the information.
Certainly, and there were political reasons at the time that FDR didn't act immediately. And the title is Remember This, The Lesson of Jan Karski. So what is the lesson in the play?
You can take a lot of lessons from his life. I think, to put it kind of simplistically, the lesson is to remember. If we don't remember our past, we are condemned to repeat it, potentially. And that by doing an excavation of who we are, by exploring where we came from, hopefully we can learn things going forward for the betterment of our world.
And in fact, you not only do a 90-minute one-man show, but you do a question and answer session at the end with the audience. So what are those sessions like?
Well, we've had about a week and a half of them at the Washington, D.C. Shakespeare Festival Theater. And they were very moving, very insightful, and very engaged because Washington, D.C. was his hometown for pretty much half of his life. And his students were there, people who knew him. We were kind of, home field advantage there, really. But I understand there's a large Polish community here in Chicago, obviously, who will be excited to see if people who knew him or know of him show up. And so we're offering an opportunity to discuss, share, and experience together.
Indeed, a large Polish community here, long called the largest Polish city outside of Warsaw here in Chicago. You're doing this through November 14th. I'm just curious, the stamina, mentally and physically, that it takes to do this one-man performance, because it's not like you're just sitting around reading a story. You're very physical in this, so how difficult is that?
Well, it's difficult, but you train to do it, and it's an hour and a half of fairly intense presentation, but it's also in respect of Karski himself, because as a teacher he was very animated, very demonstrative. People wanted to have his class because of his performative skills and his general energy and telling of anecdotes. it's sort of in sync with who he was as a professor.
And there certainly is a lot of relevance to the message in this play to the times that we're living in now. I want to go back to Good Night and Good Luck and your performance as Edward R. Murrow. Obviously, that was relevant then, talking about Joe McCarthy and McCarthyism and news. Do you reflect on that movie now, given the current climate of misinformation and distrust in journalism?
Every day, every day. I have a notion to contact George Clooney and Grant Heslov, whoever has the film, and say that film should be revisited. And it dovetails a lot with what Karski represents: misinformation, bearing witness, telling the truth, being an eyewitness, and having the information dismissed and denied and ignored. So both of those, Edward R. Murrow and Jan Karski, I believe, are cut from very much the same cloth.
Certainly be very exciting if you did revisit Good Night and Good Luck for these current times. I don't know where to say. You've made so many wonderful films, so many big films, indie films, Oscar-nominated Nomadland. It just kind of swept the country by storm last year. Were you surprised at the reception that movie got?
Somewhat, yeah. After thinking about it, I think it was a question of, extraordinarily good timing, because people were being, COVID was displacing people. There was a huge diaspora of people who were through foreclosures and economic impoverishment and a lot of critical issues that were affecting the world. But people were isolated from each other while we were making that film, and then it went on to this day. And I feel Nomadland kind of struck a nerve about people who are wandering, looking for some kind of community again, looking for a place to put down roots, whether it's, wheels on the road or finding a community again. So it's not surprising after thinking about it that film really struck a real nerve.
Certainly relevant for the time that we're living in as well. And through all the films I could go over, I would just want to bring up some of the Chicago connections, 8 Men Out and League of Their Own. Any particular memories of working here in our fair city?
Always a great time. I haven't worked here enough, but 8 Men Out was certainly a blast. It's really great. And I made a small movie called Ball in the House years ago in the suburbs outside of Chicago. But I've always wanted to work in Chicago because it's one of the great American cities for sure. It holds a lot of history, and it's kind of a pillar of the culture.
And you're at a great theater there, Chicago Shakespeare Theater, and again, the show is...
It's such a beautiful new theater here. It's extraordinary. We're really blessed and grateful to Chicago Shakes for bringing the play here.
Absolutely. In the show, remember this, The Lesson of Jan Karski is playing till November 14th there at Chicago Shakespeare Theater at Navy Pier. And David Straithairn, thank you so much again for joining us.
You're very welcome. Thank you for doing this, Paris. All the best.
Of course. Thank you, too. And up next, we dig into the reports of sexual abuse at the Chicago Park District and much more in our Spotlight Politics. But first, we take a look at the weather. The state's political landscape is shuffling with the new congressional map and the political fallout of the Chicago Park District sex abuse scandal. All this and much more are the focus of this week's Spotlight Politics. And joining us this week are Heather Sharon and special guest Tony Arnold from WBEZ. Amanda Vinicky and Brandis Friedman, of course, off tonight. Tony, welcome. Let's start with that new congressional map where anti-Trump Congressman Adam Kinzinger announced he would not run again for the House. Take a look.
I cannot focus on both a re-election to Congress and a broader fight nationwide. I want to make it clear, this isn't the end of my political future, but the beginning.
Tony Arnold, if it's just the beginning of his political future, what does his future entail?
Well, certainly it's conceivable that he's aiming to run for higher office. What that office is anyone's guess and fun to speculate. Is he looking at running statewide here? We have Illinois governor up for election in 2022. We have the U.S. Senate seat currently held by Tammy Duckworth up for election next year. Secretary of State, I don't know. Or is he looking beyond Illinois and looking to run, nationally in a few years? I think we just don't know right now. What we know is that he's made himself a name as being a Republican who is anti-Trump, and whether he wants to be defined by that or not, he's certainly acting like he wants to be. Then that's where he is within the party. And he's also, he's shown himself to be a formidable fundraiser in this time of being in this status and taking on Trump. And so I could see him keeping that federal campaign open and fundraising that way and going that route. Right. I could also see him running statewide next year.
He's got this political action committee called Country First, which supports Republicans or middle-of-the-road candidates that don't want to go the direction of Trump. Heather Schroen, we had this election last night. The Virginia governor, a Republican, won there. The New Jersey Democrat barely won. I don't know. Do you think that plays into Kinzinger's calculation or anyone else's calculation? You could look at that Virginia. Sorry, I was just going to say you could look at that Virginia race saying, it wasn't really a Trumpy Republican that won, and maybe that's a sign the party doesn't rely on him.
Yeah, I got a couple texts from people saying that Glenn Youngkin, who will be the next governor of Virginia, reminded them of Bruce Rauner, who was, of course, Illinois' last Republican governor. He was a hedge fund guy who tried to moderate on some social issues while promising to improve the economy and focusing on jobs. And that is clearly, if there is an anti-Trump or at least a non-fully embraced Trump path in Illinois, blue states like Illinois, then that's what it's going to be. I'm not convinced that there is that path, but we will have to see, because right now, everybody running for the Republican nomination for Illinois governor is fully on board with Donald Trump. So we'll have to see if that changes.
All right, well, let's move on to the Chicago Park District scandal. 2 reports outlined sex abuse at Chicago Park District pools and beaches. Former Park District Superintendent Mike Kelly is out, and the interim boss, Rosa Escareno, said she was, quote, stunned and horrified by what the investigations found. Take a look.
You read the reports. One of the really sad things for me is that these women tried to do the right thing, and it went unheard. The ball got dropped at several levels.
We have to credit Tony Arnold, your colleague Dan Mialopoulos, for a lot of great investigative reporting that brought this to light. Heather, Mike Kelly, the former CEO, is gone. Any other heads to roll here?
Yes. Rosa Escareno announced she had fired 3 of this Park District's top supervisors. She said that they did not follow the Park District's rules in handling those complaints. However, this is an ongoing investigation. There is still a lot we don't know. We do know that the interim inspector general found corroboration for complaints of harassment, abuse, and assault from 4 teenage lifeguards. But there's more to come, and it's not clear whether other people who helped steer the Park District during this time, whether they will be held to account for their role as well.
And it's not just the Park District, it's a messy situation there, but a messy situation at Loretto Hospital after all that reporting, starting with Block Club on those shots that were given to the rich and famous and ineligible folks that were connected to Tony. Could criminal charges come from this, or just a fine for the hospital? What do you think?
Well, we know that federal investigators have issued subpoenas to the Illinois Department of Public Health. And so, while plenty of criminal investigations are opened and not necessarily don't necessarily result in charges, is it conceivable that they're looking at are some of the people who received these vaccinations and cut in line, basically proof that they weren't eligible, and that Loretto basically was using these vaccinations to get clout or to reward their friends? That's possible. What the crimes are, I'm not sure. And so, I think the subpoenas are a good indication that if you're at Loretto, it's time to get a lawyer.
And we should mention that the Chicago Department of Public Health and Mayor Lightfoot did their own sort of investigation into it, I think, and nothing much came of it, and they kind of clapped their hands and moved on. Let's move on ourselves to the casino situation here. Mayor Lightfoot is holding a full house, so to speak, with 5 casino proposals submitted. Does it mean that a big casino resort in Chicago is a sure bet?
I don't think so. We don't really have any details about where these casinos will go, except we know that one is proposed for the so-called 78 development, which is south of the South Loop and in between Chinatown. Also, there seem to be several proposals for McCormick Place, as well as at least one for the Chicago Tribune printing plant just off Chicago Avenue there. And it is unclear whether any of those will be acceptable to the mayor. And this is something that has to get through City Council. Now, the casino is expected to generate somewhere in the neighborhood of $200 million for Chicago's police and fire pensions. So it's a lot of money at stake, but a lot of aldermen want to see this casino somewhere other than downtown to help breathe new life into neighborhoods that have faced just decades of disinvestment.
And Tony Arnold, is this kind of development a win for state coffers too, or is it just kind of reshuffling the deck when we've got new casinos coming online in the suburbs? You've already got Rivers, you've got Aurora, you've got Elgin. Does it just kind of maintain the status quo?
No, the state would definitely get a cut of the tax revenue from the Chicago casino, as you mentioned, as part of that gambling expansion package that passed in 2019. The suburbs would get some more new casinos. Sports betting's already online here in the state and is already rolling in money for the state. So, I was looking at earlier, Rivers Casino in the suburbs, north suburbs here, it does far and away the most amount of business in the state. And, the state gets $200 million.
Could the Chicago one cannibalize that one? And we should mention Rivers has 2 proposals for Chicago.
Absolutely, it could, because the Chicago casino is not just a casino. It has the potential to be a mega casino. It could be one of the biggest casinos in the whole country. Not necessarily the biggest, but when they passed it, they set it up in a way that potentially there could be more seats, chairs to go sit down and bet at a table than almost anywhere else in the country. That's, we'll see what the final proposal is. We'll see what gets accepted, where that goes. But they're looking at, absolutely, they could cannibalize some of what's being added. Obviously, that's a concern, but the legislators passed on, and Waukegan's still moving forward with getting its casino. The south suburbs are doing theirs, and they're clearly targeting Northwest Indiana here to take back the people who travel across state lines to go gamble.
Right, and there's new casinos in Northwest Indiana. So if it's the biggest casino, one of the biggest casinos in the country, I wonder if that means it'll have the most Elvis impersonators or the biggest Wayne Newton show or Elton John with the red piano. We'll see. The mind wanders. All right, we're out of time. Our thanks to Heather and Tony. Thanks so much. And there's a new bar in Andersonville that is one of the city's only bars left catering to queer women. Chicago Tonight's Joanna Hernandez recently stopped by to learn more about the inspiration behind the bar's name, Nobody's Darling.
Upbeat, women-centered, fun cocktails.
Those are some words business partners Angela Barnes and Renata Riddle say describe their newly opened bar, Nobody's Darling.
I don't think we quite anticipated the response. I think we knew that queer women would be like, oh, this is awesome, 2 women in our community are opening this bar. But we've had such a response from, straight people in the neighborhood, the trans community, gay men. I mean, it's just really been kind of this amazing space for people to come together and really have a mutual respect for each other.
The neighborhood bar on the corner of Belmore and Ravenswood used to be Javad Divine, a lesbian wine bar that closed during the pandemic. These longtime friends joined forces to take over the space and say they're focused on inclusivity and a good craft cocktail.
I have a passion for cocktails. It's like when I have a good cocktail, it's like biting into a juicy steak. I was like, I want to open my own bar and have that same energy and passion and give it, to other people.
As for the bar's name, Nobody's Darling, Barnes got inspiration from her collection of poetry. The poem, Be Nobody's Darling by Alice Walker, spoke to her.
The poem is about being authentic and not being afraid to, kind of follow your own path. Even if you're considered an outsider, people say you can't do something, just sort of go boldly forth and kind of be who you want to be. We felt that's kind of what we were doing, so.
Now the lounge is giving women a place to come together as hundreds of lesbian bars have closed down across the country. The Lesbian Bar Project is a short film that showcases the decline of women queer-owned bars. The film reports that since the 80s, about 200 lesbian bars have shut down and only about 21 queer spaces are still hanging on.
We're excited about being in this position, and we don't take it lightly. Every day, we're literally trying to get better in what we do. Because we're new to the business of this industry.
And give back. I mean, I think like one of the things is we try to feature African-American owned alcohol as well as women owned or queer owned.
And when this dynamic duo are not running the bar, Barnes is a legal counsel while Riddle is an auditor. The two say they're working hard to create a lively space where they have the ability to host different events and welcome everyone from the LGBTQ+ community.
To see, your, 60, 70 crowd, sitting right next to, the 20-something, trans women sitting next to, like the gay boys in their 30s, something's going to happen, right? And in a really good way. And it's just the conversations.
From the aesthetics of the bar to their craft cocktails, it all blends and pays homage to influential Black and brown women.
We put our heart and our passion into the bar. When we thought about the name, from the cocktails to the way we wanted to look, it was something that okay, when we walk into the space, we're proud of it.
Making their mark not only as two queer women, but business women thriving through the pandemic, hoping to encourage other women to go for it.
You come here to have a great cocktail, listen to music, and find community. And the conversation flows from there.
For Chicago Tonight, I'm Joanna Hernandez.
Nobody's Darling is open Wednesday through Sunday, and you can find it in Andersonville. There's more information on our website. And we're back to wrap things up right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
And that's our show for this Wednesday night. Don't forget to stay connected with us by signing up for our daily briefing. And you can get Chicago Tonight streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news. You can also get the show via podcast and the PBS video app. And please join us tomorrow night, live at 7. It's home to the largest collection of African-American history and literature in the Midwest. We visit Washington Heights as part of our In Your Neighborhood series. And the inspiring story of how an aspiring concert pianist who was paralyzed on his right side at the age of 10 launched a successful career in music decades later. And now for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Paris Schutz. Thank you so much for watching. Stay healthy and safe and warm, and have a great evening.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a personal injury law firm pleased to give back to the community through numerous charitable initiatives.